And now it's time to welcome an idea generator and energy creator and the first female partner of Foundry 45. Please welcome DiGrazia Dojnik.
Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? I know you've been sitting here for a long time, so I need to hear some energy from the audience. All right, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. I want to thank you all for being here with us today and being here right now, because this is going to be the best panel of your afternoon. Why? Why is it going to be the best panel of the afternoon? Because we are here to talk about technology for good. We are bombarded every day about cybersecurity issues and Facebook hacking and, I don't know, the Russians getting into our, into our politics. So I want to be here to share the amazing work from all of these folks sitting up here with me. They are the innovators who are using technology, whether it be coding or AI or VR and AR, or just the power of seeing how technology has affected them at such a root level, and they're just getting started. You're going to hear these stories, and I hope you walk away inspired this afternoon and recognize ways that you'll be able to use technology for good. I'd be doing them a disservice if I decided to sit up here and introduce them, so I'm going to hand off to Ivy and let him do the introductions. I'd love for you to spend 1 minute on who you are, a little bit about your company, and if you've had an aha moment of how technology has influenced where your company started, I'd love for you to include that too.
Of course. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Ivy Ashton. I'm a lawyer. I happen to be from Chicago, and I'm the founder and president of a company called LegalServer. And we work at the intersection of law and technology, serving vulnerable populations and communities across the country where people can't afford lawyers. So the problem that we're trying to solve is a little bit different than most lawyers. Most lawyers make their money by charging by the hour. The people that we work with are lawyers that are serving people that can't afford lawyers. And so our technology automates systems and workflows so that these lawyers can serve more people and have a bigger impact and amplify the advocacy that they do in their communities.
Nice. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Joey Womack. It's my life's goal to help or impact 1 billion people by the year 2030, and I'm super serious about it. But, my entire life, I've been obsessed with creating efficiency within ecosystems. So in 2014, I thought about, how can we create a better or faster way to create change in the social impact arena? And so my thought was to create a hackathon where we would take the best nonprofits and create internal solutions in about 48 hours. And so since then, I've worked on training innovators both in the tech startup world and digital storytellers to create projects that address inefficiencies in areas of education, economic development, financial access, health, and environmental sustainability.
Sarah?
I'm Sarah Koch. I'm with the organization called Development and Gardening, or DIG. I founded it in 2006. We work with smallholder farmers who are nutritionally vulnerable, mostly in Africa, designing gardens for their nutritional vulnerabilities that provide for their livelihoods, their nutrition, food security, help them become more climate resilient. It's kind of interesting that I'm in this space because the farmers that I work with are so not tech. Tech is something that is hard for them to access, and what I have recently been doing with Dana as a partner is developing some VR storytelling to help create empathy and tell the story of what their lives are like and what the work we're doing. So I'm excited to be in this space today.
Jhillika.
Hi, I'm Jhillika Kumar. I am a student at Georgia Tech as well as an aspiring entrepreneur. I personally grew up with a brother with autism, and he was diagnosed when he was 3. So he has never spoken a word in his life, and it's truly been inspiring for me to see him grow. When I was 10 years old, my parents brought home the iPad, and at the time I had no idea of the impact it was about to have. But this boy who had never brushed his teeth independently was swiping away, navigating through the interface, and I thought, wow, technology has the power to give the voiceless a voice. And that's sort of been my lifelong mission, and I started a company called AxisAbility, and it's my dream now. We have a booth over here, and it's great. This event has been amazing to showcase how much technology can be used towards social good.
Good afternoon. My name is DiGrazia Daniels, and I'm a project manager at Futurus. At Futurus, we use augmented reality and virtual reality tools and technologies to create unique experiences and unique tools for various clients. On a panel for Technology for Good, I've volunteered in the community, and I've been very active in the past 2 decades in using technology to help train and help educate our youth, to embrace the technology and to dispel the notion that technology is difficult and it's hard to figure out. So I've worked with a lot of organizations such as First Robotics to utilize these technologies to overcome some of the challenges we have in our communities.
So you can see why this is an impressive panel, to hear what some young folks are doing at the precipice of making sure that technology is accessible for all, to folks who are utilizing technology to showcase work that's being done from afar over in Africa. As we start to think about the exponential change and how things are happening so fast, did any of you craft a 5 or 10-year plan, and has that sort of been the pathway that's led you to where you are today? Anyone?
Well, we stopped thinking in terms of 5 or 10 years. We think in terms at most of 3 years. And the way that we approach it is we look at technology as a whole, and we look at it as a tool. Sometimes in our space we get caught up with the buzzwords of artificial intelligence or what all the names are, and it becomes overwhelming. From our perspective, from where we sit, we look at how can we take these tools, how can we leverage them, what are they good at, what problem do they solve, and how do we introduce that to the ecosystem so that we can leverage them. And once we did that, it actually creates kind of the pathway for what those 3 years ultimately become, and we just constantly fail forward, learn, reiterate, and just push it forward in that way.
So share a little bit more about that, because I think you realized from the start of your career to sort of maybe where you are today, there was a big pivot that happened along the way as artificial intelligence sort of came to have a moniker, I'll say.
Yeah, so as a lawyer, as trained as a lawyer, one of the tenets of law is that lawyers are responsible for our legal system. And as I said before, our legal system doesn't work unless it works for everyone. And we all know that if you can't afford a lawyer, you're going to have a really hard time navigating our legal system. It was written by lawyers for lawyers. So we talk in terms of this 100% access. And the aha moment I had was, we're nowhere near that. Right now, 85% of people that have a legal problem can't access the protections of our legal system. Our legal system, I'm afraid to tell you, is failing. The only thing that I can think that we can do is to use technology to help the lawyers help more people, or to simplify our legal system so that you don't need lawyers, or at least don't need them as much as we do now. And when I saw my kids walking around the house talking to their phones, asking their phones questions, and their phone was responding in their native tongue with answers, it hit me that that's a lot of what lawyers do. Clients ask them questions, and they provide answers. We happen to sit on tons of data, which is one of the things, if you know anything about artificial intelligence, that's really important to train systems to be able to answer questions. And so we started putting together strategies for how do we leverage this data for good? How do we leverage it to give insights into these legal situations so that we can help more people?
It's amazing. It dumbfounds me every day about how people can garner insights and leverage tools that they might have or not have. And then next year, that just evolves and changes. Has exponential change sort of caught up with anybody else and fervored you to create a plan that maybe you started in one place and maybe pivoted to another? Anyone else?
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you go.
No, you go.
For me, it's a bit interesting to start to have these ideas around how technology can interface with these stories of very vulnerable farmers very far from here. And one of the applications that I get really excited about is a lot of our supporters are individuals. We're funded by a lot of grants, but also a lot of individuals. And to be able to effectively tell stories using empathy, which virtual reality is so powerful at doing, and not only just tell these stories and transport people to Uganda, as you can see in the film trailer we have in the booth next door, but to help train people on this side of the story, someone who feels very far from these farmers, to help them understand how you show up in these places, how you can be a better donor or be a more connected supporter, and not frame these problems so far away as abstract, but how they're connected to you, how you relate with them in this space. And that conversation to me is really interesting and exciting, and while it's not directly my work, it feels very involved.
Joey?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting, right? So for me as a company founder, I do have to think on a 5-year basis, but from a curriculum perspective, especially as we're training these innovators, we're more like on a 6-month thing. So it puts a lot of strain on us as we're trying to triangulate between their potential users, customers, investors, and where kind of technology is going. Like, how do we adjust for that? So our curriculum is constantly being reevaluated and updated. We're thinking about what are the investors seeing, and how might we or talk with them to get them to influence the founders in terms of what they're building.
That's really interesting. When you start to think about how what you might be doing today is going to be different 6 months from now, or there's a new technology that's up and coming. Do you guys have any predictions about sort of where things might be changing over the next 10 years, and maybe how these different technologies might influence? I know, Sarah, you just shared how virtual reality has changed how you speak with your donors, but anybody else have that sort of deeper rooted thinking on where things are headed over the next 10 years as it relates to your work?
I'll take this one. For future of technology, the things that you see Ivy working on here, machine learning, I think that's going to be very, very important into the future of tech, right? We're going to start programming our devices to learn how to do some of the mundane tasks that we have now. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, you already see it from the example that Ivy gave earlier about the phones are now able to respond and give the user some type of relevant information, some relevant feedback. So machine learning, I think, is going to be explosive in the future of our technology.
Yeah. It's interesting because when we look at technology, we look at it in the aggregate, actually, and we look at the systems we build, and not meaning like the computer systems we build, but the systems we build as society to govern society. If you take something as fundamental as a court, and you say, so I was giving a presentation to a group of judges, and the topic was disrupting technology in courts. And the judges laughed. They said, courts are courts. We're not going to be disrupted. I said, I don't think that's true. eBay, for instance, handles 60 million disputes online using artificial intelligence in a platform called that's called online dispute resolution. 99.9999 of those cases never enter a courthouse, and they get resolved through this. They said, okay, fine. Well, tell me another example of how technology may disrupt what we do. I said, driverless cars. And then they laughed. And they said, why would you say driverless cars impact courts? I said, how do you get funded? Speeding tickets and parking tickets. It's like, you have to get your head around that when there are no people driving anymore, there are no one speeding, and we're not parking the cars. How are you funded? So my point is that all these technologies touch each other. Systems of trust like blockchain, augmented reality to help people who are intimidated to walk into court to be able to experience the courtroom before they get to court, so they feel more familiar when they get there. Artificial intelligence, as we've talked about. So when I think about all of these technologies, I mean, there are things that in 10 years, the technology hasn't been invented yet. So it's hard to predict what 10 years is going to look like, because I really believe that a lot of that technology hasn't been invented yet.
Agreed, agreed. I know that there are really great things that are coming. Are there things that we've learned from the past? Are there things that we should focus on today as a society as we move forward with all these technological advances that we should sort of lead a cautionary tale? Are there considerations that we should focus on to make sure that we learn from our past as we move forward as it relates to your organizations?
Yeah, I think with me, speaking from the perspective of a founder, and obviously as an entrepreneur support organization, there's two big things you look for, right? Or two of the top 3 or 4. One is problem, and second is team. So I look forward to how technology like artificial intelligence can help us define problems better. I know Tracy said that earlier on your amazing speech. So it's two things with the problem, right? I do think there are huge opportunities for artificial intelligence to help us diagnose problems that entrepreneurs can then solve, but also, again, my bias is toward ecosystems. How might we use artificial intelligence to point out the right problems that someone else can solve? Now, the second thing around team, it's very difficult as these technologies, quite honestly, become more difficult to create. There's a higher barrier to entry. The divide between somebody that's not a non-technical founder and someone who's technical and actually that knows the future tech and also can produce it is going to get wider and wider. So opportunities exist to either educate non-technical founders and non-futurists, for lack of a better way to describe it, on things coming down the pike, or I say more so, how might we train futurists and technologists to create startups? The third part of that would be how might you match those two types of individuals together, and a big part of that is lack of trust between them. And so speed is a function of trust, and speed is huge in startups. So how might we think about, from an ethical perspective, how can we create trust, between non-tech or non-futurist founders and futurists that are developers?
You know, I think you bring up an interesting point, Joey, and it's something that I feel like Jhillika, your platform is going to be able to bridge a gap on, right? You're creating this platform that will allow folks who maybe for most of their lives have been underserved in a lot of ways. And you're creating this platform for them to have a voice to maybe connect at the startup level or even at the corporate level to now have a voice. Do you want to, I feel like you need to share a little bit about that.
I think assistive technologies are definitely going to become ubiquitous. And I mean, take Stephen Hawking, for example. He revolutionized the way that we approach quantum mechanics and gravity, and he had so much knowledge, but his ALS was sort of, it eventually came on, and it was a degenerative disability. So people knew how smart he was before that happened, and they tailored technologies towards him. But now we're noticing in the research that I'm doing at Georgia Tech is that individuals with autism specifically are incredibly smart. We're seeing them type and talk to the world and talk about how they're a voice trapped in a body. And I think that when we start designing technologies for them, they're going to be able to share with us so much that we probably have no idea what they're thinking. And I think that's going to be a huge leap in innovation, targeting technologies towards individuals with these different forms of abilities and giving them a voice and giving them a platform. Even in companies, it's going to inspire inclusive hiring. I think designing for people with disabilities, by people with disabilities is so important. It's going to integrate empathy into the products that we create. And we're going to, I think, when we, as a UX designer, when we design for someone with a problem with accessibility, we're essentially making products better for everyone. So I think it's going to be incredible how assistive technology is going to help with that in that realm.
It takes all of my willpower not to have tears in my eyes being up here right now. When we were behind stage, I said, sometimes my joy comes out in tears, but I am at awe of all the work that you guys are doing up here on stage. You deserve much more than a round of applause. I think you deserve a standing ovation. So you guys, amazing, amazing. Seriously. We also know that we are the last panel before the final keynote that's holding you back from an alcoholic beverage in your hand. So we've got 1 minute left on this clock that we're going to grant back to you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for having us.